The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
Welcome back to Old Space Show. I'm Brandon, and this is my companion, Tony.
Greetings, friends and foes, and Mom, hi.
This series of Old Space Show follows the episode-by-episode time-traveling, body-hopping exploits of the first season of Quantum Leap. Today, we will be talking about the fifth episode, How the Tess Was Won. Sam leaps into a veterinarian, Daniel Doc Young, on August 5th, 1956, working on a Texas ranch owned by Chance McGill. McGill's daughter, Tess, is renowned in her skills as a cowgirl, but Chance pushes her to marry and produce children, so the ranch has heirs, like Shredder said, babies! She agrees that she'll marry whomever can beat her in a cowboy contest as long as she gets to choose. She picks Doc. After Sam sends Doc's helper boy home, he tends to a sick sick piglet in which all the animals in the home can see Al when he appears. Sam hopes he just needs to cure the pig, as Al says Tess marries a man who sends her love letters. Finding a journal with Doc's love for Tess professed, they argue over whether that counts as love letters or not, but Al says they are. Sam agrees to the contest and struggles through his lack of ability, cowboy humor, and people cheating at poker. During one of the challenges, Tess collapsed from exhaustion. Through Sam helping her back to health that night, Tess begins to slowly fall for him, but insists he has to ride Widowmaker, her impossible horse, in order to win the cowboy challenge. He succeeds, but says he did it to prove it to himself, hoping Tess would not just marry him because he won the challenge. He shares the journal, but Wayne, a jealous ranch hand who'd been unkind to Doc, shares his feelings for Tess, and that he was the one who wrote the love letters. Tess and Wayne go off to get married, and Sam discovers when the helper boy sings Piggy Sui, he realizes the kid is the young Buddy Holly and helps him out with advising changing the lyrics to Peggy Sue, and he leaps out to find himself pants down in an attic, just finishing the deed with a suspicious woman.
Yeah, what an interesting episode! It's an episode of a lot of firsts for the series.
Yes.
kind of setting a lot of precedents that are going to be repeated throughout the course of the series. Obviously Sam's first encounter with someone who is soon to be actually famous with the Buddy Holly, even though the timeline doesn't quite sync up with reality.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
We'll talk about that. Yeah, definitely. So this is directed by Ivan Dixon, who is Sergeant James Kinklow from Hogan's Heroes, and he had a lot of roles on prestigious television shows. He was also a director. Like, his directing and acting are like mirrors of each other, like such good career. He did A-Team, Greatest American Hero, Rockford Files, Wonder Woman, Bionic Woman, The Waltons, The Mod Squad, and many more. And it's written by Deborah Arakulin, which is not a Dune character or a planet. She wrote a Cagney and Lacey episode and was production assistant on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, as well as a story consultant for 4 episodes on this season. Stars, of course, Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell. But the guest stars are interesting. We have Carrie Leiser, Lance DeGault, and Marshall R. Teague. Leiser, the woman who plays Tess in this, it's kind of like, what do you know her from? Well, she was Cassie Phillips on Matlock, but she was also the creator of The New Adventures of Old Christine, which is a Julia Louis-Dreyfus show that ran for a long time, and she won Emmys for it. She wrote and produced 73 episodes of Will and Grace, and currently does a show called Call Your Mother with Kira Sedgwick. So,
if you kind of look into her a little bit, around that 2010, 2011 mark, it looks like she essentially quit acting. She decided, it's just been bit roles and, no big breakout. And she made that transition, I think, full time to that behind the scenes production type of thing. And obviously she's had pretty good success over the last decade or so. So that's great for her to kind of make that
what
pivot.
a huge person to be just this guest star that you're like, I don't think I know her from anything. And DeGault, of course, was Buck Green on Magnum PI, and lots of roles in great 70s and 80s television shows. So yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good in this episode too. This one, as we talked last time, the Farmer Leap was predicted in the previous episode, so he's here now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they again, this is I don't know exactly where this one falls in the production order, but obviously things got a little moved a little around, and I think we'll kind of touch briefly on some of the why behind that on our next episode when we talk about the next episode, which was meant to be much earlier in the process there. But yeah, this one was interesting because I'm assuming it was meant to be early on because like we just talked about, it does kind of set some of the things that you know Quantum Leap for. One of the biggest ones for me is this is the first episode, I believe, where we hear when Al breaks out Ziggy's remote control. This is the first one where you actually hear those noises. The beeper, right? Yes. Yeah. So it's because later in the season and later in the series, it becomes so commonplace you don't even think about it. But these first few episodes where it wasn't present, to me, it really stood out like a sore thumb. I was like, where are they?
Yeah, and it could have been after they were viewing the first couple episodes, they go back in the editing room and add that sound. They're like, it needs to do something with that. Make it a little, make it more spacey. Make it more sci-fi.
Yeah, because he's from the get-go, he's been really punching the numbers and banging the side of it and everything. But they kind of added the goofy little zip, 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 zip. This is obviously the episode where they first established that animals can see Al as well, which is a very interesting.
There was
I'm not
dog
quite sure
in the baseball dugout. We had
I guess that's true.
But this is one where they want to say they can.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they were trying to say that why animals can see holograms. I don't know what they're trying, like if they're trying to make a statement here or what, but
say something, something weird with animals and Al. Could that help later on? Or, it's a wonder, was there an episode later on they needed to set this up for so it didn't feel like they were just bullshitting for an episode or just...
That's a good point. Yeah, it could have been that Donald P. Belisario had in his head that like, hey, you know what? Later on, we're going to do something where all the woodland creatures come to their aid or something like that. And then maybe it never panned or something. So
here's the deal. If you're working with animals, they're not going to know he's playing a hologram.
That's a good point.
Probably in case to save time, to say that.
Sure.
That's probably why.
That's true. Because they're gonna be looking at him regardless. They're not gonna not look at the human being standing right next to him.
To come up with that conceit.
Right.
But that's probably. Now they think, that's probably
because it was very clear in this episode when Al was in the doctor's quote unquote office, and all the animals. I'm pretty sure there was a raccoon in a cage, and that raccoon was like reaching out, like his paw was out of the cage, like trying to touch Dean Stockwell. And I'm like, well, that's it. He really likes that hologram. So.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. And this one shows kind of like the challenges of the 50s because this was written by a woman, and this was at the time of, the 80s was a big women back in the workplace, women being more independent, not having to be housewives, get babies. And I feel like this was a nice reflection on look how tough it was back then or what was expected of a strong, independent woman able to do her own. Like her dad's like, well, make me babies or do, I don't know if it's fair that she concedes in the end and falls in love, but this is the time of working girl and stuff like that where it's really pushing for that. But I think this was like meant to kind of in society at a time where a viewer look how far we've come. Look, we're doing things better now.
Right. Well, like you said, it's interesting that not only in the end, obviously, I think narratively she had to make some sort of, decision at the end or whatever. Right. But with that, it was interesting to me right from the get-go that she would even agree to any sort of a contest where a man could, quote unquote, win her hand in marriage. I understand that it's a narrative device to move the plot along. But it seems like if she's that strong-willed, she'd just be like, forget all this nonsense. I don't need any of this. So.
I think it was a compromise. Like, I'll pick the way that I'm definitely going to win, and there I tried. So
right, he's like the classic underdog.
He might be the perfect guy for me. And
surprise.
And as we find, because this one they go the whole episode, and we don't see what Sam looks like till the end. Yes. And he's this little beady-eyed doctor guy, and Sam's like, "Dude, did you see how much you did? You were definitely not her type."
Right. Yeah, it was very interesting because in the first few episodes, Sam makes a point to go find out what he looks like. He looks in a mirror almost immediately. And yeah, this one, he waited so long, you had to think that it was going to be something, significantly different, whether he was going to be, and of course that was the joke they were kind of saving up for at the end. But yeah, this is definitely one of the latest, if not the latest, self-visual of him seeing what his person looked like.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like, when I watched it, I didn't even realize that till they pointed it out. I think I was into it enough where so much was going on at the beginning with the pigs and mud and all this that I was distracted away that it got so far into it, I didn't realize they did that. They hadn't shown his face. And then like,
right.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if it made that much of a impression on me the first time I watched it, but obviously in our recent rewatchings, in order to prep for this show, I was I'm looking a little bit more closely with kind of more of a finer science fiction lens, if you will, and that definitely I could tell throughout the episode of like he has, like, we don't know what the doctor truly looks like yet, and it took them a long time because as we progressed to the end, I had forgotten about the joke they made about, oh, look how goofy. She was never going to pick this goofy turd anyways. And as they got close to the end, I was like, are they going to do it? Are they going to go the whole episode without showing him? And they're like, oh, yeah, there it is. So.
And, it's funny, though. Like, this isn't like one of my favorite episodes or anything like that, but I always remembered it because of that end reveal. Like, oh, it was like he didn't realize he was this little chump guy that happened. So, like, this one is always, forgive me, I need to plug in here. But he's this like little guy, and that ending, I was like, oh, this is that one. Okay. We have like different interesting conflicts. Like there's there's the challenges where, it's ride the horse, deal this, but there's the poker cheating one, which is a really interesting scene and definitely has some suspense to it where he accuses, like, Al's looking at the cards around a poker table, and he accuses Wayne, who's just the angry cowboy guy. We have no idea why, or we think there's some jealousy, but he doesn't look like the type that would write deep love letters, so we never suspect him.
Yeah, they do a pretty good job of kind of pawning that off early and making you think it's just because that's kind of his nature. It's like, oh, Doc's an outsider, so I don't want him. When he was giving him poor tips on handling his rope and things like that, yeah, you just kind of get that vibe. He's like, oh, he just doesn't like him in general. And then that's a good reveal later on that he's the one that's truly in love with Tess and has been writing the letters and whatnot. So
yeah, And then also we have Sam. Is Sam developing genuine feelings for Tess, or is this him as Doc developing feelings for Tess? Because he's got a voiceover with it, and he mentions falling for her a bit. So
yeah, this is where, again, this is even though like we said in previous weeks, that every episode has some sort of a romantic / Sam getting in with another gal type of element to it. But this was one of the first ones where it felt like the lines may be blurring a little bit in terms of him, not that he didn't not care for the other people in previous episodes, but this one felt like it was potentially on a different level there. So
yeah, because in a way he was against the tournament too. He didn't want to enjoy it. He was hoping it'd be like the pig, or not that. Al was the one's like, no, you gotta make sure they get married. You gotta make sure they get married. So it was kind of both of them coming from reluctant sides,
right,
and kind of falling for each other.
And it's interesting too. I remember vividly watching the series, and on my initial experience with it back in the 90s, and kind of having, it was around this time. I don't have a specific pinpoint, but it was around this time that I started wondering purely from my brain works heavily on the science fiction standpoint. I don't want to be the nerdy guy at the convention saying, in episode 7 you said that this, but I do start to think along the lines of these things that Sam is changing. Is he creating like a split universe that, when he goes back, and I think we touched on this maybe in our first episode, when he goes back to the future, essentially, if he ever got back there, which, whatever, we know how that plays out allegedly, but, would he come back to something different, or, has he leapt back into somewhere that is incorrect, and by fixing it, he's now going back, he's creating his own original timeline. It kind of started to make my head swim, as most
is time linear, or is it multiversed in his
right? Like, what are we correcting here, and what's happening as a result of the corrections?
I always like to think when I was watching it when I was younger, I always imagined that, So this is a timeline where bad things happened. Like, we live in it where Sam has already fixed it right now, you and I, but he's going back and changing these things to make them like they are now because originally they weren't. But I don't know.
So it's very possible that he's jumping back into the Biff's Pleasure Palace to go back to the Future 2 references from last episode.
Yes.
He's going into the alternate 1985, and then he has to fix something in order to get back to his original timeline.
Yes.
That certainly makes sense, but I'm not sure it was ever explicitly put out that way.
No, and it's very ambiguous, and I probably intentionally so, or probably they just didn't care, so they just were like, what would be an interesting story for him to do next week? Like that's, but it becomes a show, it becomes a series, it becomes a lexicon of its own mythology and things, so we then apply rules to it, and as long as it follows said rules, so once it were to introduce what it's doing in following that, that's fine. But right now we don't know. We don't know the future. We don't know. Like, Al never mentions, oh, dude, you know what it's like now that you did this? Yeah, or we stay the same, but these things.
Right. It's almost to the point where it's almost, I don't want to say it's frustratingly vague, but yeah, it's definitely I could have used maybe a smidge more information about the quote unquote future or the present time where Sam has started his leaping, because most of this time when Al comes back in time, he's not saying, oh, this is what's going on, your body is doing this or whatever, or he's like, oh, well, I struck out with this girl and now this girl's pissed off at me and I can't sleep with this other girl. And it's like, come on, give us some tidbits about the quote unquote future here.
Right. Yeah, all Al gives is comedy about the future so far. We've had one instance, so in the Starcrossed, they gave us a little instance of like the challenges of like, you're not here to do that, Sam, or whatever. This could happen. So I think every once in a while maybe they'll come to a disagreement, and that'll pop up a little tidbit more about what he could damage instead of being there. And I think that the next episode we're going to talk about has a little bit of things like that, but expanding it. This one, we have a historical figure that Sam influences, which is the reason he was there. Buddy Holly is the kid sitting playing guitar on the porch. Buddy Holly was born in Lubbock, Texas in 1936. This would make him 20. This kid does not look 20 years old to me.
Yeah, not quite. Yeah, and I had to go do a little bit digger deep in. And yeah, by this time, by August of '56, Buddy Holly, where he was already in that 19 to 20 zone, and by that time he had actually
for Elvis by this time.
Yes, he'd already teamed up with his band, the Crickets, and signed onto a record label. So even though Peggy Sue technically didn't come out until '57, so that part, you got to fudge the numbers a little bit when you get into this funny history. It doesn't always sync up exactly, and I get that. So
Buddy Holly would die 3 years later. Like, that's
right
after this. But yeah, like, I don't know why 56 was so important. Like, couldn't you put it down a little bit and make it fit Buddy more? If that was your ultimate goal, I don't see what changing the years would have had effect on this.
Yeah, you would think so. So it's also very possible that as they were mapping out what they wanted to do with the series, it's possible that 54, 55 was already quote unquote spoken for in another episode that dealt with something in that time frame. I'm not really sure. So,
and you and I can go on Wikipedia and look this up real fast.
Sure.
Now
yes.
They don't have the resources to come up with it all. Would have been going to the library, hiring somebody to go to the library to do it. We take for granted how quickly I could find the Buddy Holly info and not spend perusing through books and stuff like that. So I will. Right. I guess there's that. We didn't have the thing like I mentioned on Old Space Show with Doctor Who, where there were some inaccuracies with some things that fans have made up because of stuff with Attack of the Cybermen. I'm like, they didn't have access. They can't just go on Wikipedia right now. And those episodes were missing that they were referencing, so they kind of had to guess.
Yes,
on stuff.
There's only so much time that the production and research department can spend on microfiche before they.
and as I'll say again, Patrick Troughton looked old in the Two Doctors because guess what? Patrick Troughton was old when they shot the Two Doctors. White does not look like they aged. So yeah, I'll just throw that in there again. But okay, you got any more for this one?
Just that a funny little tidbit that I didn't even realize until I was doing a little bit of research for this episode when we were just talking about Buddy Holly. And it was interesting that they used Peggy Sue, but that was the only song they referenced, because another one of Buddy Holly's big hits was a song called Oh Boy, which is funny because that's Sam's whole thing, and they didn't even go there.
Well, the Oh Boy wasn't a thing yet. I don't think we're...
Yeah, I guess
We're
that's
quite
true.
there.
But yeah, they didn't even sniff that part. And it's just like, oh, what a missed opportunity.
Oh, it was there. Oh, it was there. Oh, it's great. But I do love the look on. Was this the first time where, he leaps because of something really piddly and they're like, oh, it was this?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else was relatively kind of a higher stakes type of feel. And this was just like, there was no connection to, oh, well, guess what? She married the wrong guy, but now she's married the right guy. So there was no and their son's son would go on to become president, there's nothing connecting that necessarily. So yeah, who knows what this quote unquote wrong was truly about other than the wrong people getting together, I guess.
Right. Well, that'll do it for today. I think we've made right where other conversations about this episode once went wrong. Tony, tell people where they can leap to find your work.
Sure. Well, you can always hop on over to sciencefiction.com where we do new stuff pretty routinely. You'll catch my stuff there all the time. And then you can come find me personally on all of the social media websites, facebook.com/Tony Schaab, twitter.com/Tony Schaab, instagram.com/Tony Schaab, AOL.com/BoilerTone, but I don't think that's there anymore. So don't send me an IM there, please.
#LeaperSue. All right. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brand4KUHD. Written work at weisselblue.com. There's more from the Brandon Peters Show this week, but from old space.
Oh, boy.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.